So why don't we start with a quick set of introductions? Who are you? What's your role at Accenture?
Sure. My name is Jennifer Wong. I'm the power generation lead for Canada, and I sit in the energy utility strategy and consulting group. We provide our clients with strategic advice across the entire asset life cycle, everywhere from new build, project development, all the way through to operations and decommissioning. My specialty area is nuclear, and that's the area that I'm the most passionate about. I really enjoy working with the power generation sector and nuclear specifically to understand where the industry is going, how you prepare for change, and how you be resilient as the world changes and as the energy demand rises and falls. We'll go through that iterative cycle.
You mean the world is changing?
The world is changing.
You mean energy demand is increasing? Shocking. So lovely. And I hear that you have quite the background in nuclear, professionally speaking. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I spent the past 20 years in nuclear, most of which was spent at a large power generator, actually. And I worked primarily on the engineering side, doing everything from looking after safety shutdown systems and their performance to building computer systems that monitor critical safety parameters of the plant, all the way through to cybersecurity, plant refurbishment, and also SMRs, which is also a big passion area of mine.
So thank you for keeping all of our nuclear energy sources safe and secured. I think that's always a big concern and consideration for the general public. So glad to see that it's well in hand. I'm curious, what prompted you to go into this industry in the first place?
I grew up in a household that was very passionate about nuclear. My dad graduated from university, worked for Ontario Hydro back in the day, and spent his entire career at Pickering. So I always grew up with stories about the station and about all the interesting projects that my dad did. So I always had an aspiration to go into nuclear and engineering specifically. So when I graduated from university, I joined OPG and took up a role at Pickering A, where I was looking after safety shutdown systems and also got involved in Safe Story Unit 2 and Unit 3. So it's kind of like we've come full cycle now, where I started my career with Safe Story, Pickering, and now we're building new plants and refurbishing Pickering B. So it's really interesting to watch the industry go through all these different cycles.
And how do you feel, or what would be your words of advice to newcomers to the industry who are potentially looking at building a career in the nuclear sector?
I think that the sector is so broad that there really is a role to play for everyone. It's not just your engineer or your technician, but it's also folks in policy, in finance, in capital projects. I think that there's just so much interesting work in the industry right now, and it really takes a village to build up and move the industry forward. And what better place to be in nuclear than now? We're building new plants. Both Bruce Power and OPG has announced plans to do so. We're building a new deep geological repository through the NWMO. I just think there's so many opportunities, and there's a role to play for everyone beyond just your traditional engineer or your traditional scientist.
Awesome. So I think right now, a lot of people are thinking about their future career pathways, given the evolution of technology. And there's such a big societal conversation around what jobs are going to exist versus what are the jobs that are going to be challenged as a result of all these technologies. But it sounds like between the skills needed in nuclear, there's lots of growth there. And with all the data centers that we need to build to power the AI renaissance, that's actually creating even more job opportunities for those who want to get into the nuclear space. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I think there is a fast evolving area where nuclear is not being used just for traditional power generation, but it's using to power space settlements in future planets, for example, or it's being used to power remote communities or industrials like mining sites. So I think there's a lot of potential for nuclear, and it's really interesting to see how the industry stretch and grow in different places now. and that we haven't traditionally seen before.
Amazing. And so our innovation team had a chance to partner with the broader Accenture group in nuclear to put together the Nuclear Futures 2015 report. Is there anything you want to share high level about the report, or maybe the 4 scenarios that we had mapped out for how nuclear might evolve?
Yes, I think it was a wonderful thought leadership piece that was done by our Futures group. And it really is very innovative because it's not saying that this is the way the industry is going to look, because no one can predict the future, but saying, here are some 4 different scenarios. We can imagine things going steady state. So the industry continues to move forward, but nothing spectacular happens. All the way through to if we don't make the right decisions, or if there is a major safety incident that ends up impacting the industry, we fall into a state of collapse. What does that look like? So the research paper explores scenarios, from both extremes. And it also imagines a scenario where things are going very well, where Canada has stepped up to its true potential. We are global leaders in the industry. We're building plants in Canada, but also exporting our expertise to other countries. What does that scenario look like? So it's a really interesting, creative piece. But more importantly, it looks at all the common elements in all those 4 scenarios and starts making hypotheses on what are the sure bets that you can make today, and what are the decisions and things that you should think about today in order to prepare you for the future, regardless of what the scenario is, so that you can come out being resilient. So I think it's definitely a interesting thought leadership paper, something to look out for. It will be published in the next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. We're actually going to be having presence at the CNA event in Ottawa.
That's right.
It's April 15 to 17, right? Will you be there?
I will be there.
Okay, perfect. So will audience members be able to find you at the event? And can they reach out to you before the event to organize meetings?
Yes, absolutely. So Accenture will have a booth at the CNA conference. We'll be there with the entire power generation team, of the thought leaders from the power generation team. And if anyone's interested in talking more about the future scenarios or getting a glimpse into the report, we're happy to showcase at the conference as well.
Amazing. So the report had pulled out a couple of trends that are bubbling up in the nuclear world that are important for us to be paying attention to. You mentioned nuclear and space, nuclear and the use of medical isotopes to, fight cancer, and some of those other areas people don't necessarily think about the overlap between nuclear and exomain. Are there any of the trends that you're particularly excited about that you want to speak to?
Yes. So I'm personally very excited about the future and the trajectory of nuclear. I think all those trends have a lot of promise. Like we talked about nuclear and space being one of the trends. We talked about nuclear and Indigenous participation being highly important as we build new infrastructure. We also talk about nuclear being in remote communities, including the Arctic, to power new trade routes there. I think all of that is really exciting. No longer are we looking at nuclear as just a power generation source and no more than that, but we're looking at how nuclear can power other industries and economies. And that to me is really exciting. It kind of goes back to the previous conversation about the next generation of nuclear engineers or nuclear professionals. What does that look like? I think it's no longer just your power generation engineer or your nuclear engineer. It's someone who can move into any one of these areas, think differently, think innovatively, and chart new ways or new avenues. So I think that's highly exciting.
I love that. Let's talk about the Arctic example, because right now there's so much of a conversation around trade, where trade is going, deficits, new economic partnerships, routes, etc. So help our audience members understand what the connection is between the Arctic, climate change, and nuclear.
Yes, I find it so fascinating that as the world is warming up, we're seeing a lot of ice caps just disappear, right? And land mass is growing in the Arctic. So, we were looking at sort of traffic patterns in the Arctic, and we noticed that there's a lot more cargo ships now going through the Arctic. So, a lot of increased activity. So, as we're looking at the Arctic as sort of the next frontier, an area where there could be new economies and new industries, what is the power demand going to look like in those regions? How are we going to power those areas that are not connected to the grid? And is there a possibility for us to either build an SMR or an MMR that can power these local communities? So I think that is so exciting, especially now that we are building the first SMR at OPG Darlington in Ontario. There is a large potential for us to take those learnings now and multiply it across the country.
Absolutely. Whoever would have thought that Arctic ice melting is going to result in us needing to figure out how do you power things in the Arctic and potentially using nuclear power as the source.
Right. Interesting times.
It's a very interesting time indeed. Now, let's go into outer space. One of the trends that we covered in the Nuclear Futures 2050 report is around space and the new requirements and how nuclear could fill us in.
Sure. I think nuclear has a lot of potential in space as well. And we talked about multiple areas where it could fit it. It could be used to propel spaceships and rockets as an energy source. It could also be used to power local industrial applications. So one aspect that the paper explores is the concept of mining. There's different companies now that are looking at extracting critical minerals from the moon. And in order to power those operations, we could conceptually send a MMR to space, a micromodular reactor. So there's a Canadian company called Canadian Space Mining Corporation. They have licensed the slowpoke reactor design, and they are looking at potentially sending the slowpoke reactor to space in the next decade or so. So I think that's really exciting.
All right. So look out for a nuclear reactor being built in space and pioneered by Canadians.
Yes. World leading, right?
World leading Canadians. Let's talk a little bit about one of the opportunities for Canada to play a leading role internationally, given our depth of expertise in the nuclear sector and the fact that some of the world's first advancements are happening right here in Ontario by Darlington, which I don't know if people outside of Canada or even within Canada understand and really appreciate this gold mine, this nuclear mine that we're sitting on.
It is so true. I think we are a country with such deep nuclear experience and knowledge. Of course, we are the designers of the CANDU reactor, and it's, not only is it running in Canada today in New Brunswick and Ontario, but we've also exported it to different countries like Argentina and India and Romania and China. So it's already out there in the world. And I'm really excited that that technology has proven itself to be reliable and predictable. And I know our friends at Atkins are working on a next generation design, the Monarch, which has a lot of promise as well. So I think there's a lot of export potential there. There's a lot of potential for us to continue to be in that leading area. And then not only are we developing Canadian-made reactor technology, we are also taking the first steps in building the BWRX 300 SMR at our very own Darlington site. And that project is currently going through the license to construct application process. And if all goes well, we're going to have an SMR connected to the grid by 2030 or so, which is super exciting.
That is very exciting. And the opportunity for us to export as Canadians our expertise in nuclear is an incredible advantage as Canada looks at rewiring its economic ties to reduce dependency on existing trade partners.
Right. I think that dependency on a local supply chain, be it products or people or expertise, we have that large advantage here. We know how to build reactors, we know how to run them, and we know how to succeed in nuclear projects. And that's a very valuable asset, a national asset that we can export to the world.
Exactly. Let's talk about the relationship between AI and nuclear and what those two things have in common, because on the surface, people may struggle to understand where the connection is coming from.
It's really interesting because I think nuclear plays a role in two ways. It's the data centers that we briefly talked about. So it's forecasted that with AI, there's going to be an increasing demand for data centers and energy sources for those data centers. And, and we've heard on the news some of the hyperscalers and partnering with either aging plants or decommissioning plants or looking to new generation sources from an SMR, for example, to power these data centers. So there is a unlikely but evolving partnership there, which I find really fascinating. There's also how AI is transforming the nuclear industry and how it does its work. I think traditionally the plants have been built on analog technologies. So a lot of the processes and work functions that have developed over time is very much based on manual or paper-based approaches. But as new digital technologies get introduced to the plant and more data becomes available, there's this interesting opportunity now to rethink the way we do things and to really understand how the plant is running from a predictive trending standpoint, from a human performance standpoint. There's so many opportunities there that I think AI can really transform the way the industry works, everywhere from your maintenance technician to your operator to your engineer. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
So the next generation of the workforce that's working in the nuclear domain is actually going to be working in AI-enabled environments and the AI-powered factories and production facilities of the future, not the more manual, old-school plants that we've had historically.
I think so. And I think roles will change as AI frees up our productivity and allows humans to become more creative and tap into that sort of more intellectual space. I think we have the potential to do so much more when we have AI bots or agents now looking after some of the, the paper documentation or work request initiations, for example. It really frees up more time for humans to do new things and discover new areas.
Amazing. And I also love the fact that new data centers are going to be built in places around the world based on where there is proximity to a nuclear power plant to actually provide the power to these very energy hungry data sources in order to power our phones and everything else that's currently running AI at scale. So that's the unlikely connection between AI and nuclear power.
Well said.
Okay, great. Anything else about the report or the industry in general that you're really excited about?
I think this is a great time to be someone who is curious about the nuclear industry and wanting to develop a career in the industry. There is, I think, a role to play in all aspects of it, be it building a new plant or running a plant or helping with decommissioning or used fuel management. I think it's a very diverse industry. And if you're curious about it or you want to learn more, I think this is a great time for the younger generation to start participating in industry events or going to conferences or seeking out a mentor at a company that can help you understand what the role in the job looks like and how it's going to evolve in the future. Because the industry really needs more young, talented individuals right now, and the timing is great for that.
Amazing. I love this. So my last question for you is, you're running for the CNA board. Is that an elective process or an appointed process? How does that work?
It is an elective process. There is a voting member for every single member organization. And I really do hope that everyone takes the time to understand the value that I can bring to the industry, with consideration to my background in both the power generation space, everywhere from engineering to IT to operations and SMRs, and also my broader role in consulting as an industry leader who is, not only curious about power generation, but how it all works together from a distribution, transmission, and energy sector perspective. I think my unique background in all those areas really sets me apart.
Amazing. If you had one superpower that you're bringing to the CNA board potentially, what is that?
I think my superpower is the ability to connect with people in all different levels of the industry, and beyond just nuclear itself as well. I think my ability to understand, like what a engineer goes through from a day-to-day basis, versus what's happening at industry level, and being able to bridge all those layers is what my superpower is.
So the combination of the technical skills and the ability to connect with people in the nuclear world.
That's right.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining. This was wonderful. Iliana Oris Valiente. I run all of the innovation centers for North America here at Accenture. And I was joined by Jennifer, who is involved in the new Nuclear Futures 2050 report that we are publishing momentarily. So I encourage everyone to check out the report for an understanding of 4 possible scenarios of how nuclear might evolve over the course of the next 25 years. With underlying descriptions of all of the top trends that we're currently tracking, from AI to space to medical isotopes, all the way through to Indigenous community engagement. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, Iliana.